Vladimir Putin has publicly and officially rejected Donald Trump's peace plan to end the war in Ukraine. The Kremlin has made it clear that even the issue of Donbas will not stop the war. The so-called Kiev Nazi regime must be completely destroyed, and only then can negotiations to end the war take place. Today, the head of Russia's Ministry of Foreign Affairs, Sergei Lavrov, publicly stated that the Kremlin will seek to overthrow the government in Kyiv. This is reportedly what Trump and Putin agreed to in Alaska in August. Lavrov stated directly, a ceasefire and stopping the war is not what Putin and Trump agreed on in Anchorage. In fact, today the Kremlin stated that it's not about Donbas at all. The point is that Moscow wants to deprive Ukraine of its sovereignty. And notably, the Kremlin began postponing the Trump-Putin summit in Budapest. At first they said it would take place in 2 weeks. But now the Kremlin openly says that no one knows the exact date. And even the preparatory meeting between Lavrov and Marco Rubio was cancelled and postponed for another week. But Trump said that he doesn't care how many territories Ukraine loses. The main thing is to somehow stop this war. And this admission only reveals Donald Trump's total misunderstanding of the real goals of the Kremlin in this war. Subtitles provided by Simon, so I'll start with Donald Trump. As the Wall Street Journal writes today, United States President Donald Trump made it clear to the Ukrainian leader Volodymyr Zelensky that he doesn't care where the new borders of Ukraine will be, as long as Ukraine reaches a peace agreement with Russia. According to American officials at a meeting in Washington, the head of the White House said that he is not attached to any specific territorial outcome. His main priority is still ending the war. Trump also told Zelensky that Ukraine should not count on receiving long-range Tomahawk missiles in the near future. According to sources from the Wall Street Journal, Moscow and Kyiv are still far from ending the war, and territorial issues are still considered and remain at the center of negotiations. In Washington, they are certain that the fate of Donbas is the main issue. They say Putin wants all of Donbas, while Zelensky does not want to give it up. Supposedly that's the issue. Trump said Putin wants, in quotes, just Donbas. During the latest phone conversation with Trump, Russian President Vladimir Putin once again demanded to be given the remaining 22% of Donetsk region that hasn't been captured yet, as a condition for a ceasefire. Meanwhile, Ukraine and its European partners categorically rejected such concessions. Officials in Kyiv noted that this contradicts the constitution and that if Moscow gains control of the entire region, it will use it as a springboard for further conquests. At the meeting with Volodymyr Zelensky on Friday, Donald Trump was blunt, refused to look at the battle maps, and stated that returning Donbas to Ukraine is not a priority. He basically said he doesn't care who gets this territory, and if the Russians want it, then let them take it. Why won't Volodymyr Zelensky give it up? Donald Trump argues that Russia already controls most of it, or to be precise, 78% of the Donbas territory, and it would only take a couple more months to capture the remaining 22%. So, according to Donald Trump, whose opinion was obviously whispered to him by Vladimir Putin, just a couple more months and they will definitely capture the entire remaining part of Donetsk region. But here, Donald Trump is very wrong. The Russians have not been able to capture these territories of Donetsk region for more than 10 years. And so as long as hope remains, well, fortunately, you don't need everyone. Money, friends, is still not. And to drag it out, I don't congratulate you. Ongoing pain serves as a warning, especially for lawyers. And first, the important thing. The girls come to... And she didn't achieve any serious goals. At the same time, a very high price was paid for such little progress. According to the publication's calculations, from the start of the full-scale invasion until January of this year, the Russian army lost 877,000 soldiers, of whom 228,000 were killed. But by October 13 of this year, the numbers had already increased by almost 60%, reaching 1,438,000, including 480,000 Russians killed. And today the Kremlin loudly simply spat right in Donald Trump's face, who is demanding to stop the war along the current front line. Russia is not going to stop military actions in Ukraine without a comprehensive peace agreement, said the Minister of Foreign Affairs of the Russian Federation, Sergei Lavrov. He noted that this approach allegedly contradicts the agreements reached between United States President Donald Trump and Vladimir Putin in Alaska. Quote from Sergei Lavrov, "Now we are hearing from Washington that we need to stop immediately, that there is no need to discuss anything further and let history be the judge. Simply stopping means forgetting about the root causes of this conflict, which the American administration clearly understood when Donald Trump came to power. And so, according to Lavrov, after talks with Putin, the head of the White House advocated for a long-term sustainable peace, rejecting the idea of an immediate ceasefire that would lead nowhere." However, that's all now. Lavrov says that the European patrons of Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky are trying to persuade the Americans to change their position and stop seeking a long-term settlement. From Lavrov's point of view, an immediate ceasefire would result in most of Ukraine, quote, remaining under the leadership of the Nazi regime, which is how Moscow views Volodymyr Zelensky's government. And so Lavrov explained that a truce would not only allow the armed forces of Ukraine to be supplied with weapons, but would also encourage, quote, terrorist actions in the form of strikes on Russia's civilian infrastructure. Damn it, you Russians started this war in the first place, and secondly, you are the ones striking civilian infrastructure. Why sit there complaining? Lavrov, this is the Kremlin's reality. So, Lavrov added that Moscow still insists on ensuring Ukraine's non-aligned, neutral and non-nuclear status, which means refusing to join NATO. In addition, the Kremlin sees genocide of the Russian and Russian-speaking population in Ukraine, the cessation of which Russia also intends to pursue as part of addressing the root causes of the war. Let me remind you that the day before, Donald Trump suggested that Russia and Ukraine stop hostilities along the current front line and agree on something later. In other words, the main thing is to stop the war. He noted that at the moment the parties cannot reach an agreement on the territorial issue, but there is a chance for a deal in the future. This also concerns Donbas, which Putin is allegedly insisting on being handed over. And as Trump said, let it be divided as it is. I believe Russia has already captured 78% of this territory, and Zelensky and European leaders supported the American president's call to freeze the war along the front line for further settlement. The Kremlin stated that Russia is still against such an option since, quote, it is important for them to achieve their goals, which are well known to everyone. So in fact, today, the Kremlin basically told Donald Trump something like this. Donald, come on, understand already, it's not about Donbas at all. Even if you somehow force Ukraine to give up the entire Donetsk region, that won't stop the war. Because a huge part of Ukraine will still remain under the leadership of the legitimately elected president, Volodymyr Zelensky. But the Kremlin is not satisfied with that. That is why the Kremlin will keep fighting until it overthrows the legitimately elected government and installs a puppet government in Ukraine. And that puppet government will completely lay Ukraine at Moscow's feet. This is exactly what the Kremlin means by the root causes of the crisis. In fact, Lavrov said directly today that Russia will not stop until Ukraine loses its sovereignty. Therefore, all of Donald Trump's words that Putin is only asking for Donbas are complete nonsense. It's not about Donbas at all, and the Russians themselves are already saying this publicly. I'll leave it at that. Share your opinions and conclusions in the comments below this episode, subscribe to the channel, hit the bell, and don't forget to like. That's all for now. Take care of yourselves. Goodbye, everyone.